bathroom, and the bathroom door is locked, and we just heard the bell ring. That's when we came.
Okay, I want you to stay where you are, okay?
Okay.
All right, sweetheart. Like I said, I've got officers there on scene, okay?
Have you guys got other calls about?
We've got hundreds of calls.
Okay.
Okay, stay where you are. Let them know that you're in the graders in the bathroom, okay?
Okay.
All right, sweetie. Bye-bye.
Hello?
Hello, this is Cincinnati Police. We received a 911 hang up from this number.
Yeah. I'm down on Town Square, and a lot of people are running around saying there's a shooter.
Have you seen anybody with a gun or anything?
No, I haven't seen anybody. I've heard things sound like gunshots, though. There's police that are coming down here on the scene now with their sirens.
Those were two of the calls that we received. Multiple officers responded to the scene as continuing reports of an active shooter were called in to the Fifth Third Center. As officers tactically approached the building, multiple gunshots rang out, which enabled the officers to pinpoint the shooter's location. Running towards the gunfire, officers spotted a lone gunman actively firing shots in the first floor lobby of the building. 4 of the responding officers were able to engage the gunman, shooting him through the plate glass window, causing him to fall through the floor. Officers then made entry into the building, subdued the suspect, and began to render aid to the victims. What we're gonna show in the next slide is video footage from the lobby of the Fifth Third Center. This has been edited as the actual footage is extremely graphic, but I did want to be able to show the activity of what the gunman was doing. You will be able to see some of the actions of our officers and even see some of the heroic actions of the security officers that were stationed in the lobby of the Fifth Third Center. Security officer helping individuals get to safety. Gunman firing shots at anyone he sees. The top of the screen, you can see officers approaching. They engage in gunfire. You'll see the suspect struck by gunfire by our officers. This slide depicts the approach our officers took. The 4 officers that engaged the suspect initially approached from the Walnut Street side. They proceeded through the breezeway and down to in front of the Fifth Third Center, past the Potbelly restaurant, and to the front of the Fifth Third Center. The next slide you're going to see is the body cam footage of one of the officers as he approached the Fifth Third Center. He engages the gunman as he enters the front door. He's down. A second clip from one of the approaching officers as well. You'll see her body cam footage. Back. There we go. Thank you. See our officers responding and neutralizing the threat of the gunman. With the assistance from the SWAT team, officers conducted a sweep of the building and the surrounding area and secured the scene. The suspect has been identified as reported as Mr. Omar Enrique Santa Perez, a male 29 years of age, and he was determined by fire personnel to be deceased on the scene. There were a total of 5 victims that were shot by Mr. Perez. 4 of the victims were transported to the University Hospital Medical Center. 1 was determined to be deceased on the scene. 2 of the victims who were transported from the scene did later succumb from their injuries at the University Hospital Medical Center. The deceased victims have been identified as Mr. Richard Newcomer, a male age 64, Mr. Prudai Kandepi, a male age 25, and Mr. Louis Calderon, a male age 48. There were 2 other victims that sustained injuries from the gunfire from Mr. Perez that are also still being treated at the hospital. Mr. Perez was armed with a Taurus 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Through the investigation, we've been able to determine that the handgun was legally purchased by a local gun store here in Cincinnati in August. As you can see from the picture, during the course of the exchange of gunfire, this firearm malfunctioned, had a misfeed, and basically in effect jammed. Mr. Perez fired 35 rounds during the incident. As you can see from the footage, he was carrying a briefcase carrying approximately 250 rounds of extra ammunition. Some additional information: the time elapsed from when Mr. Perez fired his first shot, which was at 9:06 a.m., until he was stopped by our officers, was approximately 4 minutes and 28 seconds. 55 seconds passed from the time Mr. Perez fired his first shot until the first 911 call was received at 9:07 a.m. So our response was approximately 3.5 minutes. A little bit about Mr. Perez. He has been issued several traffic citations in the area, but has no local criminal history. A total of 11 rounds were fired by the responding officers. 8 rounds from our 9mm sidearms, 2 shotgun rounds, and 1 rifle round. It has not been determined at this time how many or which officers' firearms actually struck Mr. Perez. That will come later from the coroner's office. The officers involved: Officer Jennifer Chilton. She joined the police department in 2008. She's assigned to the District 1 Neighborhood Liaison Unit. Officer Antonio Etter joined the police department in 2002 and is assigned to District 5 Patrol. He, in fact, was one of the first officers on the scene. He was working an off-duty construction detail in the immediate area. Next, Officer Eric Kaminsky joined the police department in 1997, assigned to the District 1 Patrol Unit. And Police Specialist Greg Toyes joined the police department in 1990. He's assigned to our SWAT and Tactical Coordination Unit. I also want to mention that anyone who was a witness, again, to these events or is in need of any victims assistance service, they can contact our department's Victim Assistance and Witness Advocacy Unit at 352-6421. Some additional information: again, what we found out about Mr. Perez, we have not been able to determine what his actual motive was. What we do know about him: he's been in the Cincinnati area, we believe, since 2015. He has about 7 different addresses that he's resided at here in Cincinnati. We also know that he has a brief criminal history, misdemeanor criminal history in South Carolina and in Palm Beach, Florida. At this point, we'll turn it over to the mayor for some comments before we take any questions.
Thank you. Earlier today, I reached out to the extent that I could to the victims' families and left messages. But I did speak with Cynthia Newcomer, whose husband was killed yesterday. And she told me that her husband was a construction worker at Turner and I think Gilbane over 30 years, and that he built this city, that the buildings that we live in and work in, he helped construct. He loved the city, he loved the Bengals. We're going to get through this, and Cincinnati is strong because of people, everyday citizens who build buildings, who do their jobs, who work as IT, as Raj and others. And once again, we would just want to express our incredible sadness and grief and condolence to those who senselessly lost their loved ones yesterday. I also want to say that, and you saw some of it today in this video, the heroism of these officers is truly remarkable. And you could see in the video, it may not be obvious the first time you see it, but you can see the guy shooting at the cops and them not being afraid and engaging to end it. With hundreds of rounds of ammo, if he had gotten on the elevator, if he had gone up to a floor, if he'd been there a little bit earlier or longer, many, many more people would have been killed. It's also the case that in addition to our police and firefighters, that our 911 call dispatchers did a great job. As we all know, it's been a rough couple months for them. If you listen to the compassion of the woman that was talking to the lady at Graders, you can see that this was a team effort to end the violence as quickly as possible and to remove the threat and to save lives. It's also the case that, as you'll see eventually later, and I'm glad the video was edited to save the families, that these officers, once entering, that there were people sheltering in place. There was a receptionist that I saw yesterday on a body camera who literally was in the middle of gunfire, and you saw her emerge in one of the body cameras seconds, 30, 40 seconds after the shooting stopped. And the fear that you see in her face is hard to forget, followed by a sense of gratitude that the cavalry had arrived. A sense that, I don't know exactly what the officer said, but essentially, it's over and you're okay now because you're with us. The police saved lives, and we owe them all a huge debt of gratitude for what happened. It was horrible enough, but trust me, it would have been a lot worse if those officers hadn't rushed in when they did. Today at 4, obviously, we will be having a vigil for the families and for the victims and for this city. And we will also have a prayer for those first responders. This morning, my son had a mass to kick off the school year, and I went, and the message was to pray for peace. And we need that. We need to pray for peace, and we also need to take the actions necessary to prevent crazy people from getting guns. Thank you.
My condolences to the families and the friends of those that lost their lives yesterday. I think I'm internally grateful for the team that we have here today. All the way from the mayor and the council, we appreciate their guidance and their support, the policy decisions that they made to always make public safety a priority, to make sure that our police, our fire department, and our emergency communication centers is always well funded. It showed what a value those kind of policy decisions can have on a city in our response that you saw yesterday. As the mayor said, and as the chief indicated, if this was a couple minutes longer, it would have been worse. But everybody got together, all the way from Fifth Third, from doing all the things that are necessary as far as had it in place, our fire department from saving lives, our first responders, our police department from saving lives, and our 911 takers and dispatchers. They acted swiftly, efficiently, in a timely fashion. And I'm grateful for the work that they did, and I'm grateful for the support that counselors provided us. Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up to a few questions.
Chief, the tactics have changed since Columbine, whatever. Go the Alice training, go after the shooter. Talk about what goes through the mind, the training that's done right now that led to what we saw on those body cams.
You're absolutely correct. We train for active shooter situations. Our officers have this year actually just completed their in-service training, and included in that was just this. We do some live scenario-based training regarding active shooter, and as you can see, our officers responded to that training and performed very well. I couldn't be prouder of them.
When you take off your chief's hat and look at it as a citizen, what do you think when you look at that body cam video and you see the actions from a citizen's perspective?
I think that's absolutely right. The mayor indicated that the cavalry was coming. I think as any citizen, I would feel good to know that my help was coming when I needed it. Yeah.
Chief Sharon Coolidge, Cincinnati.com. Can you take us through what we know about Mr. Perez in leading up to how he got to Fountain Square and what happened once he arrived there?
We did find that he arrived there by his own vehicle. We found his vehicle parked on Court Street. He entered several different businesses in several different locations around Fountain Square. Again, I can't confirm what his motive was and what his thinking was, and I know it's been reported already that he did file a lawsuit against NBC Universal and TD Ameritrade. It is possible that he may have been trying to work his way to the federal courthouse. Certainly can't get inside his mind and confirm that, but we could really find no other motive or any other connection that would have brought him to that location.
Do we know what time he arrived?
Not exactly. We have some approximate times, but we can't confirm exactly. Well, a few minutes before the shooting actually took place.
Chief, will we ever know the motive, you think, from any of the evidence?
You know, we're still processing evidence. We did a search warrant on his residence, as you all are aware. Nothing that obviously stood out as to motive. However, we will be doing some further examination. We've got some great help from our federal partners that will assist us in that as well, and hopefully we can find out what occurred.
Can you say where he purchased the gun?
He actually purchased it from Point Blank, I believe, over on the west side.
In his medical history or criminal history that would prevent
That we found it was legally purchased.
Chief, can you talk quickly, Todd Dykes, Channel 5, the tactics again, as Tom was talking about, the idea of shooting through glass, is that something that is a supported tactic, or was this something that they had to do in that moment?
Yeah, when you find yourself in that situation, that's what you do. There has been training throughout the years where that takes place. When we purchase the type of ammunition that we purchase, that's something that we consider, that our officers may be in that situation at times. And in this case, it worked the way it was supposed to.
Megan Mydell, Local 12. First, you talked yesterday about how he entered through like a loading dock area. Kind of explain more about that.
That was some of the preliminary information that we received. What actually occurred is the first two victims of his shooting fled to the loading dock area. So some of the initial reports came out that was the way he entered. We were able to confirm later, in fact, that was not what occurred.
He walked in the front.
He walked in the front door.
Well, through Potbellies, right?
Right through Potbellies, yep.
Side door.
The side door into the building.
And you had said his gun jammed at some point?
Yes.
Can you talk
Yeah.
about
Do you know
how
what
the
his work
officers
history
are
was?
doing now, and was one of them, how are the officers doing now, and was one of them set to retire?
Yeah, one of the officers that did respond to the scene, he was not one of the four officers that engaged. So, yes, there was an officer on scene that it was his last working day. He was one of the perimeter officers that responded as well.
How are those four doing today?
You know, they're doing as well as can be expected. You know, I had a chance to speak in depth with 3 of the 4, and they're all doing very well. They're, you know, they knew they did what they had to do. They were very, you know, very resolved that they were there to save lives, and they were very committed to that. You know, as the police chief, as a fellow police officer, as a citizen of this city, I couldn't be prouder of him.
Chief, do you know what his work history was? And he had no connection whatsoever to the bank, not even an account there.
Nothing that we were able to find from Fifth Third that he was an employee or a former employee. His work, as far as his work history, I'm not certain of.
Chief, were the officers that we saw in there inside the bank, were they armed as well?
The security officers were not armed. So as I saw that footage, I was extremely impressed by their heroic actions to shield innocent people and try to get them to safety. They should be commended.
Do you think they should be armed?
When the gun jammed, was he then down after that, or was that?
You know, it's hard to say. I know just looking at the footage, it looked like he reloaded. He may have had some other malfunctions and cleared them. But when after the shooting occurred, when we looked at his firearm and examined it, you could see that there was a misfeed there. At what point that actually took place, I couldn't.
Did he buy the ammunition in bulk when he bought that gun?
I'm not sure about the ammunition, how he purchased it or when he purchased it. In August 2nd, I believe.
Have you been able to make contact with his family? What do we know about what was going on in his life?
You know, we've done some follow-up investigations. I believe the bulk of his family is in Puerto Rico, so we have not had any in-depth conversations about that.
What's going on in his life?
Not as much.
Chief,
Yeah.
Palm Beach Area Mental Health Center sought to involuntarily institutionalize the suspect in 2011. Is the department aware of this? Would that have prevented it from?
That's something that we're still continuing to investigate, and I mean, you know, we can't speak to that. You know, his medical history is not something that's always readily available. Maybe I need to add you to my staff. That was good investigative work.
If you have that information, we'd like to have it.
3 or 4 questions ago, so we're
But
gonna wrap it up.
thank you all. There'll be more to come. All right.